The iOS 10 Control Center was honestly one of Apple's weirdest and also one of their greatest features of the iOS 10 release, which came out all the way back in 2016. And with this update came a completely redesigned Control Center. As you guys can see here, a lot of people either loved it or they hated it. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about why this Control Center failed and why Apple got rid of it. And by the way, this video is sponsored by Squarespace. You guys can use a variety different number of templates to build the perfect website for your business. More on that later. Now let's talk about the iPhone 7 that I have here. Of course, this one is running iOS 10. I got this off of eBay not too long ago. And yes, this thing does have the iOS 10 Control Center. I'm not gonna lie guys, it does look a little weird when you first look at it, but you get used to it pretty quickly. Now, one thing you'll quickly realize is just how different this Control Center was from previous iOS releases. For example, with iOS 10, we now had an additional panel to select your music, to control the volume and all that stuff, and a lot of people didn't like the fact that you had to swipe over to do that. And honestly, I do feel your pain. I remember using my iPhone 7 Plus back in the day, and it was pretty weird to get used to. Now, comparing that against iOS 7, which was actually the first ever iOS version to come with a control center, you can really see how different this control center really was. You know, back in the day, you would just swipe up, all your toggles were at the top with their brightness right below it, and the volume controls and all the extra little controls there as well. Everything was really cluttered and sort of close to each other, but it made sense on a smaller display because back then this was considered the largest iPhone. But of course, as Apple came out with larger iPhones, they had to adapt and they had to change the way that the control center looked. And it makes sense, you know, Apple had to change something with the control center. They can't keep the same exact control center every single year, and this is the approach that they took with iOS 10. And personally, I was a fan of it. I kind of like using it, but I can see why a lot of people were annoyed by it, especially having to swipe over to turn down the volume. That could be pretty annoying when you're in class or something, you know, your phone's just making a loud noise and you need to quickly turn it down. That's an additional step that you have to take in order to turn down the volume. But you know, everyone's use case was different, and I can see why this was an issue, but I'd say for the most part, Apple definitely did the right thing by changing the control center, because what we have today is so much better with modern iPhones that have a notch, and it's cool to see that they kind of changed it over time. And if you guys do have the opportunity, try out the control center. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It'll be interesting to know what you guys say. Now, before we get into the next segment of this video, let's talk about today's video sponsor, Squarespace. They offer a selection of some of the most beautiful custom templates that you guys can use to build the perfect website. Of course, I built a little website selling my iPhones that I have in my collection. You can also set up email campaigns to schedule emails using some of the templates that Squarespace has. They're very beautiful, very easy to use. And of course, this is very important if you have an online store, which you can also build using Squarespace to sell pretty much any product. Be sure to head over to squarespace.com/iClassic to get up to 10% off the purchase of your first website or domain. But yeah, the iOS 10 Control Center was honestly pretty weird. Like, it's crazy to think that this Control Center was only available for 1 year. It's kind of rare for Apple to offer such a big software update and then completely remove it the year after. It's really weird to think about, but it's kind of cool that it was succeeded by a much better control center. This phone right here is an iPhone 13 Pro with the current style control center. I really like this style a lot, but it makes sense that Apple had to change it after a year with iOS 10, because in 2017 the iPhone 10 came out and the iPhone 10 had a notch, so you could no longer swipe up to access the control center. You had to swipe down no matter what. Obviously, if you had like an iPhone 8, that was a different story, but they were able to change the control center for pretty much every single iPhone running iOS 11. And I'm not gonna lie, I do miss the old control centers a lot, but it's kind of a reminder that software isn't always perfect and changes will always be made. And Apple pretty much listened to the community. They heard what people were saying about the iOS 10 control center, and some people liked it, like I mentioned, but a lot of people did hate it at the same time. But for me personally, I'm pretty happy with the control center that we have today. I think it works perfectly with the notch iPhones, but for those who are still using an iPhone with a home button, I kind of would like to see the old control center come back, maybe in a different form, not in the same form as the one on iOS 10, but yeah, it's definitely something that I would love to see, but probably not something that Apple's going to prioritize right now. But yeah, that's the iOS 10 control center. It was only here for a year. Apple had to remove it because, of course, the notch iPhones came out, but it was fun while it lasted. I don't think it's ever going to come back, but if you do have the opportunity to get your hands on iOS 10 or maybe an iPhone 7 and iOS 10, definitely take it if it's a good deal. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and learned something new about the control center. But anyways, I'll catch you guys on the next one.